Welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Hullhouse. So already stepping into the new year, we have all kinds of craziness. Who would have thought America crazy, weeks ahead of the inauguration and January 6th and all this crazy stuff happening. So we've got multiple terrorist attacks, right? Which look like there may be false flags with our military or intelligence agencies behind them. I mean, maybe there's a few suspicious things about that. But not just that, there's a Cybertruck that blew up. There was a shooting in New York. So things are popping off in a pretty kind of wild way to start the new year. And there's a lot of us here questioning, what's this year going to look like? What's the inauguration going to look like? What's Trump going to do in office? Will he make it into office? But most importantly, how do we live without fear? We after seeing these videos and the images of these trucks plowing through crowded markets, are we now going to become too scared to take our family to a Christmas parade or a 4th of July celebration? I mean, these are some very real questions that we have to be asking ourselves as Americans living in a country that just so happens to be the target of multiple massive criminal cabals, right? It's just where we are in history. And so joining me today is Chad Prather, who you've probably seen. He has a fantastic podcast on his own. He was with Blaze TV for some time. Just a brilliant guy, but very just Texas. He's just a very Texas kind of guy. And I like that about him. So we're going to be chatting about what's happening in this country, how to get through, what the next 3-4 years looks like, how to not live in fear, and so much more. So folks, please enjoy the show with Chad Prather. A future where every decision you make today creates a foundation of security for tomorrow. Right now, optimism fills the air. A new chapter under Trump is beginning and opportunities seem endless. Markets are climbing, spirits are high. But beneath the surface, whispers of change grow louder. Policies, tariffs, and global shifts are shaping a new economic landscape. The US dollar holds strong, but what happens when the world questions its place, which is already happening? What happens when nations turn away from the familiar and toward the uncertain? Gold is different. For centuries, it has been an anchor in the times of change, a hedge against inflation, a shield against volatility, a sanctuary when the world feels unsteady. Gold doesn't follow the tides. It remains steadfast, unyielding, and enduring. Close your eyes and imagine your wealth secure. Imagine your future unshaken. This is the promise of gold, a tangible investment free from the whims of politics and markets. The time to act is now. While optimism reigns and markets soar, remember that true wisdom comes from preparing for what others cannot see. Gold is not just an investment, it is your anchor, your protection, your legacy. Take the first step towards securing your future. And there's no better company to work with than Noble Gold. Protect your future. Act now. Call 626-654-1906 or visit goldwithseth.com to get your free gold and silver investment guide. Again, that's 626-654-1906 or goldwithseth.com. Mr. Chad Prather, it is great to finally have you on the show. I first came across you on Blaze. I had the app and the TV subscription. Who's this guy in the cowboy hat? He's got a cool vibe. And, so it's great to kind of come around full circle and have you on the show. So thank you for being here.
Seth, thanks for having me, man. I've been looking forward to hanging out with you a little bit. For those of you listening or watching this, we're doing this in the morning, so I feel like I'm in my pajamas. I'm really not. I honestly got dressed for your show. I just threw a hat on, and I always question. You mentioned the cowboy hat. I always question whether or not I should wear the cowboy hat on other people's shows or what. I've always kept the cowboy hat because that's the culture I come out of, and it automatically, like you said, it raises the question. People go, "Who is this guy? What has he got to say?" And sometimes they underestimate you, which is fun.
It is. I've kind of settled into, like, I used to wear a suit jacket and I'm just like, that's not really me. Like, actually, this is me. These aren't pajamas, but this is my flannel. I am wearing pajamas on the bottom half, right? This is a morning show and waist up, but so I will be, just to be honest, I've got my let's see, what am I wearing today? I've got my LL Bean moose skin slippers on my feet below. So
there you go, so right there. I've got my I got my leather Twisted X on. Don't even wear socks, just black slippers.
No socks for me. Yep. Anyway, we're at a very unique time in this nation. So you and I are doing this interview on the 2nd, January 2nd. Yesterday was New Year's Day. We saw a lot of chaos in America. I just saw this morning there was a shooting in Queens, New York. Maybe it was like
Hmm.
11 people shot. I'm not sure what the total number of death count or kills or injured was, but we had the ex-military guy that drove a truck through the crowd down in, I think it was in Bourbon Street area down in New Orleans. We had the Cybertruck explosion. Now coincidentally, both of the guy behind the Cybertruck explosion and the guy that behind the attack in New Orleans, both ex-military, both I think actually were at Fort Bragg for some point, which
Yep.
is raises all kinds of questions for me. But kind of stepping back and looking into the deeper underlying themes, which is where I think you and I both like to live in our discussions, is let's not focus on like the bread and circus and the Coliseum and who's fighting. Okay, who's controlling the
Mhm.
fighters? Who's drugging them before the fight? Who's buying the bread for the crowd? Who built the Coliseum? I mean, these are the questions I think that we need to be answering. And so when you look across our country and the landscape, which is really unique right now, right? We're coming off of this high of the Trump win in the election and all this excitement and Elon Musk coming forward, but we've now got the H-1B kind of split. There's this kind of like this MAGA civil war happening. And now
Mhm.
into the new year, we've already got attacks ramping up, and I'm kind of seeing a lot of chaos. Is my word of the year is going to be chaos. I just think that as much as many good things are happening this year, there's going to be a lot of chaos. But I want to
Yeah.
get what are you focusing on? What's your sense? What's your gut telling you? You're someone that's watching the news and you're talking to a lot of people. And what's your assessment of where our country's at right now and where we're headed?
Yeah, there's a lot going on. That's for sure. And my first inclination is to express the grief and the sadness. Obviously, this is a loss of life. This is a tragedy. This was an attack. This was senseless. Trying to unpack all of that could take us, the rest of our lives. I mean, there's still so many questions we ask about 9/11 and so many different things that have transpired in our lifetime. And we're good at conspiracies, right? And I one of those guys. I've been accused of being a conspiracy theorist, and I just tell everybody, I said, at this point we're all conspiracy theorists. And the reason we are is because the mainstream media or wherever we get our news tends to tell us only so much, right? And I was listening. I traveled yesterday, and I was listening to the news on my satellite radio in my vehicle, and they spent the entire trip, hours on the road for me, and all they did was tell you what they don't know. Now they have to fill in the time, right? And I said back in the 80s when I was a kid, I said, when Ted Turner came up with CNN and I said, how are they going to fill 24 hours a day, 7 days a week news they're going to have to come up with stories in order to fill that time because there's just not that much news to be telling. And so because they're not going to be talking about Puxatawny Phil seeing his shadow, right? So they're going to come up with something to keep the viewer intrigued. So they spent the entire day telling us what they did not know and what they speculated on, and they were waiting for answers. And so what happens is you wind up with this mental void. There's no information there, and voids don't exist in nature. So our imaginations and our questions and our brains and our study and our exploration and just our inquisitive nature rushes to fill that void, and we come up with theories. And so it's okay. In a free market of ideas and a place where we're supposed to have free speech and opinions are welcome, and we should be able to have dialogue and discussion, debate, even disagreement. Those things should be okay. But we're living in a society where every idea gets attacked. And I think they should be dissected because ideas do have consequences. But we're living in a country right now where we're kind of fragmented because in one sense, we're dealing with the sadness and the grief of this tragic event, but we're trying to unfold it because this affects all of us, right? I look at, I had a friend of mine who texted me this morning. Well, Sarah Gonzalez from The Blaze, my very dear friend, Sarah Gonzalez. She texted, she's going to Washington, D.C. Our friend Brandon Gill, Dinesh D'Souza's son in law, is getting sworn into Congress. She's attending that. She said, I don't want to fly today. And I said, I don't blame you. I said, but you can't, obviously you can't live in fear. And there's a lot of people. I'm supposed to be at the inauguration now. A lot of people are second guessing. I'm supposed to be at the March for Life in Washington D.C. in a couple of weeks. Now, people are second guessing. There's all these things that now you look at it, you say this type of thing affects me. Do people want to go to a football game tonight? Do they want to attend the Super Bowl? And at the end of the day, when you live like that, fear wins. And that's where we can't live. We can't exist in that place. And I think our country is dealing with a lot of things where we're trying to find the truth. We're trying to figure out what in the world's going on, who's in control, who's pushing the buttons, who's pulling the strings. And at the same time, we're got our heads on a swivel because we don't know what's coming. If I go into a restaurant, am I safe to sit with my back to the door? No. If I'm at a parade, if I'm taking my kids to a park, I mean, where are we at in this country? What's going on? And so, that's kind of the 30,000 foot view that I take at this stage in the game of saying, who do we trust anymore? If the COVID pandemic, whatever you want to call it, revealed anything, it revealed that people can't trust our institutions anymore. We can't trust the media, as we've discussed. Our court system is corrupt. We saw that in the lawfare against Trump and many other things. Our educational system is gotten brainwashed and corrupt. Our federal governments, our state governments, all of these things, we don't know who to trust. And the list goes on and on and on. There's so many medical. I mean, the medical industry, we don't trust that anymore. So who do we trust at this stage in the game, Seth? It's a hard place to be in, and here we are. We're not good at being dictated to as Americans. We still have an independent spirit, so that we're not just going to trust somebody who's going to come out and give us a watertight answer and believe that that's the truth. It's crazy, and you're right. I've talked to a lot of people that are special forces, former special forces, people that have engaged and been a part of government things. And man, this whole thing yesterday is very, very fishy, but everything that's happened uh the last however many 30 years have been very fishy. So where do we go with this stuff, Seth? Obviously we don't live in fear, but where do we go with it?
Yeah, it's a tough place to be because I remember when the pandemic first hit and early on my wife and I we were both kind of what you'd call the conspiracy theorists. We saw through it.
Yeah.
When we said, okay, this is event 201, this is operation lockstep,
Mm,
and we knew the playbook, and so we were watching it, and then they rolled out with the jabs, and we kind of watched that, but then we got into the whole thing about shedding, which has now been
hmm.
proven to be true. And but
Right.
even for us, we lived at a place where we had our first daughter was born in 2020, right? So she was born in September 2020, which was a crazy time to have a kid, right before the
Yeah.
election. And but at that time, kind of shortly after that, there's all this discussion about shedding, and so we became very reclusive. We weren't
Mm,
not going out because we were scared of getting, catching COVID, and I wasn't wearing a mask and, wasn't doing those
mm,
things, but we were worried about, okay, what's up with all these spike proteins that are kind of coming off? Do we want to bring our daughter to the local farm market even? And
yeah.
so we, even though I felt that we saw through things, we were still living in a state of fear. And so at that
Mm,
time, we were living back in Ohio where I grew up, and we lived, way out in the country. We were building a homestead, and we had, chickens and gardens, and it was this mentality though. It was a very fear-based preparedness approach. We were kind of
right.
hunkering down, waiting for the world to collapse, right, so we could kind of ride it out. But I realized that we'd become very isolated and very alone, and it wasn't healthy. And so we moved, about a little over a year ago. We moved and we bought a house in a different area, which we have a lot of friends in a big community. But it's really shifted. But I can see though that there's still so much fear. And
Yeah.
even now, if people aren't scared of a virus, or they're not scared of whatever pandemic that they're pushing, people are certainly, I think, as you mentioned, second guessing, should I go to this parade? Should I go to
Yeah.
that big event? Because there's this concern of what's just happened, but also, unfortunately, if you look at all the people that have come across the border, the fifth column that exists in our country, it's comprised of Chinese military, PRC military,
Right.
gang members, cartels, terrorists coming from the Middle East. I mean, they've let all this stuff in, and so I almost feel like right now we're sitting on this ticking time bomb of, when's it gonna be the day when these terror cells get the call that says, okay, now's the time, and you have something that happens, that maybe collapse, takes down our grid across the nation. I mean, these are very
Yeah.
real threats, and I don't want to live in fear, but I also don't wanna live with my head in the sand and be really ignorant and have something go wrong and be like, "Oh, crap, now I can't defend my family, I can't feed my family, and I'm now stuck in a bread line or doing whatever it takes." So, I mean, how do
Yeah.
you knowing all this and being aware of everything that's happening, how do you keep yourself centered, and how do you not live in that kind of a fear-based lifestyle?
Yeah, the world is out of control in such a big way. I mean, you look at the drones in New Jersey a couple of weeks ago, and everybody was speculating about that, and it was amazing to watch the inaction or the ineptitude or even the lack of intelligence on the part of the government. They said, well, we don't know. Come on, you quit feeding us these lines. I mean, something's going on here. It's not one big prank that's going on. So, you look at these things and you go, why are you guys trying to, keep us in the dark and feeding us crap? And to your question, I am the same way. I try to keep myself prepared. I try to keep my head on a swivel when I'm in public. I was in Nashville, Tennessee, a number of months ago, and I was sitting having a cup of coffee outside, and I was talking to a friend, and I was watching people walk down the street, and you catch little glimpses of their conversation as they walk by, and the stuff they were talking about. I just had this sense of foreboding. I said, people live in this false sense of security all the time. They don't understand how dangerous the world is. They don't, and I've spent a lot of years in third world countries. I've been in places that youth goes where angels fear to tread sometimes. And I've been in places where I look back and I go, man, that really was a dangerous situation. And we're starting to see this false sense of security that we've always had here in America, that we're protected, that we're taken care of, that somebody's looking out for us. There's that guy in the tower or that man on the wall. And we're starting to see that the wall's kind of flimsy, right? When you realize that you have more fighting age illegal males in this country than we do actual military members in this country. That's a scary thought. And I sent my friend Matt Murphy, who's a former Green Beret and very active in the intelligence world. I sent him a message yesterday. I said, I just feel like a lot of things are being greenlit right now. People can get into the research of MK Ultra and the brainwashing and the drugs and you talk about, these are two former Army guys. Both were at Fort Bragg. Both rented a vehicle from apparently the same company. There's speculation about, well, it's not just speculation. They seem to confirm that the truck that was used in the New Orleans attack was came across the border at Eagle Pass, not by this driver, but by somebody else. I can't find anybody in the special forces community. Now, again, at the time this comes out, this may be proven completely wrong, but I can't find anybody in the special forces community. I've even seen Tim Kennedy, who knows literally everybody in the special forces community. I mean, Tim Kennedy is a friend, and he knows everybody. He's reached out saying, has anybody served with this guy from Vegas who's supposedly a Green Beret? I can't imagine a Green Beret, a special forces guy, committing suicide with fireworks in a Cybertruck. That doesn't make any sense. Then you look at the news headlines that says a Cybertruck or a electric vehicle explodes. Like the misleading headlines that are basically saying that an electric car exploded. That's not what happened at all. So we're being fed a lot of garbage. But how do you live? I live with preparation. Now, my preparation might be a little extreme compared to what others what others might do. I'm a big believer in being mobile. I have a vehicle that doesn't have a single computer on it. I'm not making any 500-mile trips, but I can get where I need to be. It's basically a tractor with a roof on it. I have, obviously we've got food, we've got access to fire, we've got access to water, the ability, we've got, ammunition. We've got the equipment that ammunition goes into. I have tents. Christmas Day, I took my big canvas tent out to the middle of nowhere, and we camped out for a number of days just to make sure that everything was still watertight and good and taken care of. There's that ability to produce heat. I mean, you look at the threats that we have right now. You alluded to the grid. People have no idea how fragile our energy grid is in this country. We saw it here in Texas of just a few years ago when our ERCOT grid went down because apparently we don't know what to do when the temperature gets below 31 degrees here in the state of Texas. That grid is still not where it needs to be. The American grid, the grid across this country, Had that Chinese balloon that was shot down after it crossed every significant place in America and took surveillance footage, and they finally shot it down off the eastern seaboard of the United States. If it had been carrying an EMP, which took out the energy grid in the eastern seaboard, we're talking 2 or 3 years of blackout. You got about 72 hours before the bad guys realize that the good guys aren't going to come. And we've started to realize that the good guys aren't really coming anyway. Right now with the defund the police movement in Austin, Texas, unless you're in the active state of being murdered or raped and you call 911, they're not coming. They're just not coming. They don't have the human or the financial resources to take care of people. Our law enforcement has become second responders. You are the first responder. But now we saw with the Daniel Penny case in New York in the subway situation that you're scared to stand up for yourself. And so what do you have? You have an illegal that set some woman on fire on the subway. We just saw 2 days ago where a guy pushed another guy out in front of a train in a New York subway. Another person got their neck slashed 3 nights ago in the New York subway. So if you eliminate the Daniel Pennies of the world and you start penalizing yourself or you get penalized for being a first responder, somebody breaks in your home and you eliminate that threat, guess what? The police are going to come and put handcuffs on you until they sort it all out. So this is the world we're living in. I encourage people to live in some place that is absolutely as free as it can possibly be. Get your butt to South Dakota. I would love to say get to Texas. Texas is better than many, but it ain't that great anymore. We've got a lot of people that parade as conservatives, and they're not. Florida seems to be doing reasonably well, but you got to get yourself. You talk about homesteading, you talk about having the chickens. Everybody should have feeder rabbits. And people are like, man, this is so extreme. I'm like, exactly, because it's not extreme when you think about how the rest of the world lives compared to that false sense of security that we live under. And it is a false sense of security.
It really is, and I think that it's stems from a really strong normalcy bias and cognitive dissonance that the vast kind of majority of the American population has. If you look at how people live now versus how, like, my great grandmother who lived through the Great Depression, she always
Yeah.
had a fully stocked cellar. She had a huge garden. She knew how to can her food. She knew how to clean a rabbit or clean a fish or whatever it was. And we're now at a time, and again, I think that when Trump was elected, and we won the election, I was, of course, saying, "Hey, this is positive." Much would prefer that
Yeah.
over the other alternative. But I, kind of caution people, and even with my own thinking and my own family, I'm saying, "Look, don't rest on our laurels. Like, don't put our feet up and think that, hey, we're fine now," because now I feel like that, now is when the war's really starting, because
Right.
they've lost the deep state or cabal, however you want to refer to them. They've lost control of the White House. Now, there's some people that say that Trump has different allegiances that they're questioning, and yeah, I'm sure that there's certain controllers of Trump that we're not aware of that. Um, who knows what other side agendas are happening, but I do think that he is, very American first. He's very,
Yeah.
nationalist, the things that really align with my own value system, very pro God and, all the things I'm sure that you and I could spend a lot of time talking about where we come together
Sure.
in our beliefs. But I really believe though that, even looking at the energy grid, I'm not sure. Have you ever interviewed Jonathan Hollerman?
I have. Yes.
Okay, yep, so I've had him on the show a handful of times, and I found him through his book. So at that time, I was living in New York
Right.
City. I was living, like, on the 42nd or 41st floor in a high rise in New York City thinking about prepping and thinking, "Okay, holy crap, like, if the grid goes down, like, I'm screwed if I live
Yeah.
up in a building in New York City." But, now obviously, we're out in the country, we're on about 7 acres, and we've got enough land, and we've got, forests surrounding us full of deer and
Love
everything.
it.
But I think that this is it's, there's unfortunately, I really believe that there's a lot of threats that could be hitting our country, and I think that, the fact that we've just entered into the new year and we're seeing it's almost like the playbook got activated, right? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, from the inaugurate or from the election up until New Year's and the holiday, things seem relatively peaceful. There's some infighting within, people argue on social media about H-1B and all that kind of stuff, but those are minor things compared to this. But then when you look at, these two, the two, the Cybertruck and the truck down in New Orleans, yeah, you're right. There's so many anomalies there. I even, heard was reading this morning about how they have these the steel kind of pylons that are supposed to be in
Hmm.
place, for the busy streets to prevent cars from coming in, and how those were supposed to be up, but they weren't up, right? So
Right.
it's almost like, looking at 9/11 or even looking at October 7th over with the, the Hamas attack. And it's like, well, how did they just, a cat can't get across that border without getting shot by an IDF soldier, right? So
Right.
how is it that this, these things have come about? And you look at, again, both these people, both these men were military. I think they're both, had spent some time at Fort Bragg. It reminds me of, what was it? Fort Hood, right? It was the Fort Hood shooting, which was
Right.
that was down in
Yep.
Texas. Is that correct?
Yep. Killeen,
Right?
Texas.
And again, it was another guy that I think was on all kinds of psychiatric meds that talked about hearing voices in his head,
Yeah.
that carried out those shootings. And it makes me wonder, getting into MK Ultra, I've been interviewed, folks like Kathy O'Brien or, people that have detailed like, yeah, like these are real programs. And it makes me wonder are they using is some of the strategy behind this? I'm just kind of throwing some ideas out there, but is it using some of these Manchurian candidates? Is it using these people that are,
Right.
because we know the military has, go back into Michael Aquino and everything. They've got very, very advanced mind control programs.
Hmm.
The Manchurian Candidate was a documentary. I mean, it wasn't a movie as far as I'm concerned. It's a
True.
documentary about how they can use MK Ultra, psychedelic drugs, behavior modification drugs, but then also use things like voice of God technology, which, I'm not sure if you looked at the patents for that, but it's like, oh yeah, they can project voices into people's heads. Like, here's the
Yeah.
government patents for it, right? So it just makes me think that, are we is this being geared up for something, something bigger? And I don't know. Certainly my head's on a swivel. And what do you think?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you this, if I had an agenda and the tools to get it done, I would use those tools to get the agenda done. And if we can come to this basis agreement, this foundational agreement, that we have some untrustworthy, unsavory characters that are out there trying to run things, and they have access to those types of things, then why wouldn't they use them to be disruptors? We all know, for whatever reason, we all know that the powers that be do not like the shadow figures do not like Donald Trump. I mean, they've spent billions of dollars and mindless hours over the last number of years trying to convince us that Donald Trump was the Antichrist. He's not. He and again, I'm not one that's going to say I'm just going to jump from one billionaire class to another. They've got Soros on one side and Elon Musk on another side, and you got Trump in the middle. Who knows with that kind of stuff? I'm always wary of those types of personalities, no matter who they are or what they espouse. But they've wanted Trump gone, right? And so with Trump winning both the popular election and the electoral votes, they really have to be disruptors in a big way right now. You alluded to this a little while ago. The win on November 5th wasn't the end of the story. Now it was just the beginning of the chaos that we're about to see. And I encourage everybody that listens to this show, watches this show, that I wish I could say that what happened yesterday in New Orleans or Vegas or the shooting in New York, I wish I could say that was the last event we're going to see, but it's not the last event we're going to see. We've been warned. Various, we were talking before the show. Sean Ryan has been very vocal with his guests about the potential upcoming events that are in place that can happen. We have not begun to. I just read my friend Jack Carr's latest book. It's his nonfiction book called Beirut. You consider what happened in regards to the Beirut bombing. Was that 82 or 83? I just read that book. It's a phenomenal book. And the mass casualty event that was, and just kind of the safeguard let down blind eyes that were turned towards that, and what escalated to that. What happened in Beirut could easily happen here in America. We saw that with the Murrah building in I'm so horrible with years. What was that, 94? I think it was in Oklahoma City, the federal building bombing. We weren't, that Tesla explosion yesterday, fireworks aren't, 4,800 pounds of fertilizer. I get that. But that could have been theoretically that could have been a mass casualty event as well. I mean, we for whatever reason he detonated that in a Cybertruck, which is, if you look at it, I mean the Cybertruck is basically, with the exception of the glass in the trunk space, it's undamaged. I didn't even break the glass in the front of the Trump Hotel. So that's curious to me. But yeah, so you look at all of these things and you go, okay, the assets are out there, the tools are out there, the people that want to control and stay in power, they're out there. So
Okay, every new year, we all spend a few days seriously thinking about what we can do to improve our lives. And usually it revolves around better health, right? I want to strongly encourage you to do what I do. Take responsibility for your health by taking Balance of Nature's whole food ingredient supplements. Seriously, they're packed with 31 varieties of fruit and vegetable ingredients, from tomatoes to sweet potatoes, and just about everything in between. This is a resolution you can truly keep all year long, like I do. So, folks, this is your last time to put it off, because today you can become a preferred customer at Balance of Nature. So use my discount code SETH, SETH, to get 35% off, free shipping, plus a free fiber and spice supplement. This is an unbelievable new limited New Year's promotion, but you must use my discount code SETH. So call them at 800-2468-751 and use discount code SETH, or order online at balanceofnature.com. Use discount code SETH to get 35% off, plus a free fiber and spice supplement.
we're just, peasants out here trying to, feed our chickens and gather the eggs and keep ourselves alive and keep our kids from being brainwashed from a Marxist socialist educational system that's out there, and brainwashed by all these screens that they're in front of constantly. And we're just trying to live and be left alone and leave others alone and keep as libertarian of a mindset as we possibly can. And we got people out here trying to kill us for some reason. So it's kind of a weird place to be living in. But again, man's inhumanity to man is not a new concept. It's been going on since, Cain killed Abel with a rock. So we shouldn't be surprised. We should be prepared. But, Seth, the underlying issue that bothers me more than anything, and I said this 25 years ago, I said, as we move into a postmodern age, I said back then, I said, people can't define what postmodernism is, but we're moving into a postmodern age where emotions are going to overrule truth, and feelings are going to overrule facts, and people are going to feel their way into reality. They're going to feel their way into acting instead of acting their way into feeling. We're going to be controlled by people who, are overly sensitive. They're offended by everything. They manufacture oppression. They create victimhood. They're going to lose their identity. I said all of these things literally to audiences 25 years ago. I said people are going to question their identity. They're going to question their genders. They're going to question their sexuality. And what are we living in right now? I mean, if you lose your sense of identity as an individual, you're in trouble. Your destiny is in trouble. You don't know where you're going if you don't know who you are. And you don't know where you're going if you don't know where you came from. Well, when a country or a society loses that identity, you're going to get chaos because there's no order. You want to have peace? I'll preach for just 1 second. If you want to have peace, you got to have the right government over your life, because government leads to order, order leads to peace. That's why Jesus was prophesied to be the prince, government title, of peace. You got to have that right government in place, that right structure that leads to the right order that leads to the peace. We don't have peace right now because we don't have order, and we don't have order because we don't have the proper government. So yeah, here we are. I encourage people. I said, you've got to get your individual life in order first, get your family in order. Pretty biblical principles, foundational principles that I think have worked throughout the ages, and start low and slow and deliberate, and get your own house in order, and then your community, your neighborhood, your community, your city, your state, if you can. But we're so worried about what the federal government is doing, and I'm like, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, they're not coming to dinner at my house. I've been to dinner at Donald Trump's house a couple of times, but he's not coming to my house. It is a big difference in that, right? So I got to take care of my house, and that's where we are. But a lot of people, they don't want to think anymore because thinking is hard work, and they definitely don't want to do the work because that's going to take some effort and exhaustion.
It absolutely. But I want to get your thoughts on just the overall kind of shift, and the trending shift in America, because I'm seeing at the same time as this fear, chaos, everything we're talking about, I'm also seeing this really positive movement that I'm seeing that
Sure.
there's a lot of people that I think COVID was one of the greatest blessings this country's ever had, because we
True.
took a country that had been asleep at the wheel for a really, really long time, and we, completely, it was Rome 2.0, bread and circuses. People were more concerned about, Monday Night Football than the Monday night school board meeting, right? Where they can help,
Right.
understand what's being taught to their own children. And of course, there are people that have always been vigilant parents, et cetera. But in a lot of ways, I'd say that we really veered off course. And, a lot of folks that I talked to, I said, what is it that really kind of stirred you and woke you up? They said, oh, it was COVID, right? Some people it was
Mm.
9/11, some people it was other events, but for a lot of people, it was really these past 3 or 4 years that made them think, oh, like the government's not out to protect me. Like the media is lying propaganda, and so people really saw through a lot of that. And I think that's off, been one of the big catalysts towards what I'm seeing as a massive movement towards homesteading, towards homeschooling,
Yes.
towards getting back to God and realizing that man can't fix this, right? That there's only one person who can decide if America is going to make it in the future or not, and it's no one walking on Earth right now. And so I
Right.
do see though that, and that's been encouraging to me because, and this is what we've done with our own lives, and we're going to start documenting it this year and create some other channels, kind of showing this, so this process of going back towards tradition. And I see it though happening across America in the people that I'm talking to and the comments that I'm receiving. And so while there is a lot of the country, it's still kind of like, oh, what's going on? What's going on? There's a lot of people that are really getting serious and that they're taking responsibility. They're gardening, they're getting chickens, they're moving out of these big blue cities into
Yeah.
rural country, with like-minded people. Um, Also, building local communities. Like this is something I think is really big. Is that we have to pull this country off the teat of globalism. We've
Yeah.
gotten used to buying these cheap things made in China for $9. You get a mouse made in
Yeah.
China, and so I think
Right.
there's some growing pains. But I really hope over the next 4 years and beyond that we do see this shift of bringing America back to what it can be. And
Yeah.
the whole H-1B discussion, I'm much more on the opinion that, like, let's fix America first. Like, if there's problems, the solution is not to bring in outside help. Of course, there's a place right now. I've got Indian friends that are H-1B, visas, and they got married here, and they're great people, hardworking, top of their class. But they're data scientists. They're not a
Yeah.
line cook like we saw. These H-1B visas being revealed. It's like, wait, why is a line cook getting an
Exactly.
H-1B visa? Someone who's writing, in deep code and AI for Microsoft is different, right, than
Yeah.
a lot of these other things. But fundamentally, though, I really think that we have to go through the growing pains of, again, cutting off the drug of convenience and cheap stuff
So
that's
true.
put money in the CCP's pockets for them to build their war machine to come after us. It's done all kinds of bad things, and it's left our towns. Like, I'm from Ohio. My family's from Southern Ohio. You go to Southern Ohio where used to have these beautiful manufacturing towns that they're ghost towns now, and there's
Yeah.
drug problem, there's fentanyl, people can't support their families anymore. So I think that has to be fixed. But again, what does encourage me though is that there is this massive movement of people that want to buy American made. They want to they'll pay twice the amount for something to buy it from a local artisan instead of buying it at Target, right? Where it's made in some
Right.
factory over in China. But I want to see, what are you seeing? Because you're in Texas, you're observing a lot, you know a lot of people. Are you seeing a similar kind of movement alongside this evil? Are you seeing the reverse happening of just this positive trend?
Well, I do because I surround myself with people who see it that way, and I try to make sure that those are the people that are sort of feeding into my life and kind of nurturing my soul, if you will. I'm an optimistic guy by nature, right? Excuse me. I try to find the silver lining. I'm also a cynic in that I'm a passionate person who gets tired of being disappointed. And so sometimes that comes out of me, and people are like, "Why are you so negative?" I said, I'm not necessarily being negative. I just want to point out what's going on and make people aware. And excuse me. Speaking of being from Texas, we have these allergies here. So every time the weather changes, I get this stuff. But yeah, we have. we have a big God who's in control of human history, and I do believe that. I believe in prayer. I believe in truth. I believe in seeking truth. I believe in critical thinking. I believe in common sense. I do believe in goodwill. I believe in charity. I believe in, I had somebody accuse me yesterday. I've got a dear friend of mine who suffered a stroke on Christmas Day, and we're trying to raise some money for his family. He said, "Oh, so you believe in social?" Somebody said, "Oh, you believe in socialism?" I said, charity is not socialism. There's a huge difference in that, but that's how brain dead people are in our society these days. They want to throw a label on something. No, we're not talking about an economic system that leads to death and destruction. We're just talking about helping somebody get through a hard time. And that's charitable. So we look at these things in spite of the naysayers and say, the providential hand of God's been on us for a long time. And I don't anticipate he's going to take it off uh, at this point, especially if we have people who are willing to change their ways and do exactly the things you say, and that is, and go back to being self-reliant, being independent thinkers, trusting God, not the government, disobedience to tyrants, and taking care of yourself. Take a little personal responsibility. My friend TJ Morris with Refuge Medical, they are one of the biggest suppliers, American made suppliers of first aid and medical equipment that everybody should have one of their, Refuge Medical kits in their vehicles. I travel. Every bag that I have when I travel, and I travel a lot, has a tourniquet in it. I mean, you don't know a lot of people that travel with tourniquets, right? But, you never know. I mean, you never know when somebody's going to drive a truck down the street and turn it onto the sidewalk and run people over. So, he says all the time, and it's such a true statement. TJ says, personal responsibility is the biggest thing we've lost in this country, of people just taking care of themselves, taking care of their home, taking care of their family, taking care of their community. At the end of the day, it's an inconvenience, but you've got to put your money where your mouth is, man. If you're going to prepare, it's going to take work, and you've got to be ready. You need to read. You need to have the right people in your life. You need to have the right network. When Jesus told the disciples to throw their net on the other side of the boat, and he said they were pulling up the fish, and it says the nets were breaking because there were so many. I always liken that to those knots in the net being your network. How tight are those? The net is the network, but how tight are the knots? Those are your relationships. Those are the key relationships. Make sure that you got the right knots tied in your network, and have those people that are there. But I am seeing a trend. I'm seeing people out there who are saying, I want to get a little further off the grid. I don't know if I can completely do that, but I want to get a little further off the grid. I don't want to keep sending my money to a federal government that's going to spend, 250 billion, $300 billion in Ukraine fighting a proxy war, and we don't get any form of audit to know where that money goes. And we just saw the other day, Joe Biden approved another $2.4 billion to Ukraine. Well, what happened to the first 200 billion? We don't know. So I don't trust any of that stuff. I'm working my tail off to pay a federal government who's not taking care of America first and putting American exceptionalism above everything else. I'm with you on the H-1B. I just had this conversation the other day with my friend Dinesh D'Souza. I'm name dropping like crazy on this show. But I was with Dinesh, and Dinesh, he came here on a student visa, went to Dartmouth. But here's the thing about people like Dinesh D'Souza, who came here from India, versus, as you mentioned, a lot of these other folks that are here who have abused the system, is this horrible word that we've lost in America, and that is assimilation. Like, that is not politically correct to say that people need to be a part of a melting pot, come in here and embrace American ideals. Go to Minneapolis, Minnesota, where Sharia law, man, they want to put it in place because of the Somalian people that the Clintons and the Obamas stuck in there. This idea of assimilation has become a bad word. People don't come to this country to be Americans anymore. They come to basically strip mine the system and then leave us holding the check. So we got to get past all of this stuff. We need a government that puts America first. Even saying America first has become a bad word, right? Talking about exceptionalism, that's a bad word. Barack Obama had this plan to make America, we talk about globalism. He had this plan to make America like the other countries on the planet. We were up here. He wanted to bring us down here so it levels the playing field. They call that equity. I call that ridiculous. I'm thankful that God made America the greatest country that's ever existed. Our constitutional republic is the greatest idea ever conceived in the minds of man. I truly believe that God's hand was on it. People say, well, God's not even mentioned in the Constitution. Well, you need to read your state constitutions, because at the time of the ratification of the Constitution in the United States, they were basing it on the fact that the states had more importance than the federal government. They always wanted the states to have more importance than the federal government. And almost every state constitution talks about a reliance, dependence, and a belief in God. So they already had that underlying foundation there when they wrote the U.S. Constitution. And I truly believe that this idea of America is the greatest thing, this is the greatest notion ever, to almost divinely inspired, if you will. And we've got to remember that, and we got to get back to that. And if we don't, we're in trouble. But I see a lot of people who are embracing that. They don't trust anybody, and I think it's a healthy distrust, but they are taking care of themselves, or at least they should be. And they're trying to take the steps to take care of themselves. I encourage everybody, do what I did just this week. Go put your tent up in the woods, and you'll realize the stuff you forgot at home. Like, you'll be like, dang it, I didn't bring any matches. Like, I didn't bring this to waterproof that. I didn't bring. And go out in the woods for a week, and you'll realize, on a smaller scale, how much reliance on technology we've gotten, the ability to just illuminate a dark place. People don't, how had the difficulty of starting a fire in certain conditions. It's an interesting telltale sign of our reliance. I encourage everybody to go do that.
So you mentioned before that you're an optimist, and I'm similar. Like, I'm someone that, look, if I can live in the world of uncovering the things I'm uncovering, and diving into these Luciferian documents, and looking into
Yeah.
SRA victims and all the things, it's like, it's a pretty dark world, but I can still show up and usually have a smile, and still have hope for the future. I think that one of the things that really affects people, because I'm a big person, I'm a big believer in the power of vision, the power of having an idea of what
Yes.
you want to become, and letting that guide you, and shape you to become that. And I think that one of the issues is that when we look to the future, you look at Hollywood or any of the stories that we've been told, anything about the future, it's almost always dystopian, right? And I think it's on purpose, right? Whether it's Blade Runner or Hunger Games or Mad Max or any of these major, blockbuster movies, Book of Eli, what they're showing us is that the future for mankind is some sort of post-apocalyptic, post-nuclear war. People have, big, tumors growing on them. People are, raping and killing each other. And it's
Mm.
like, well, how would we possibly have the energy to fight for something if that's the only idea that you can create, or conjure up, is the vision that we've been sold by the controllers? But I want to ask you, as someone who's an optimist, but also someone who's grounded in reality, let's fast forward 4 years from now. What would you, if you could create a vision for somebody of what America could look like? Not like if the politicians do what they're supposed to do, but if the people do what they're supposed to do, and that is reflected in the political class that they have to they have to follow us, right? What does America look like? What is this, what is this golden age that Trump could be, has talked about? Like, what do you see if you were, sitting down with one of your children and saying, okay, look, this is what America can look like if we fight for it, and if we bring God back into
Yeah.
this country? What's that vision look like? Paint it for us.
My audience gets tired of me saying it, but we've got to return to critical thinking. And when I say critical thinking, here's what that means to me. Whenever I have an idea, or I get engaged in a conversation or debate, I ask myself, the first question is, where am I wrong? Where am I wrong? Like, if I hold this idea, or if I'm formulating this idea, where am I wrong? And we don't like to think about being wrong. We want to be right all the time. Men are especially bad at that, because we want to one up each other. You got a story, I got a better story. Now you got a better story, and we just, it's the locker room, talk where we just go back and forth. But I want to know where I'm wrong. If I can do that and get back to critical thinking, I think that, 4 years from now, we can get back to discussion and dialogue and debate, disagreement. Our country was founded on that. You go back and read the war of the minds between a John Adams and a Thomas Jefferson, right? But at the same time, they had the same ideal, they had the same goal. They could disagree, but they still wanted this idea of America to exist. And it was that headbutting, if you will, that caused the sparks that ultimately led to the freedoms we've enjoyed for 250 years. If we don't get back to that, we're not going to have any of those freedoms. We're already seeing so many freedoms restricted. I mean, I shouldn't have to fill out a form to buy a gun. And I get it. But this again, it's not constitutional. I shouldn't, the I shouldn't be censored because I use a certain word. For 2.5 years on my show, we referred to the vaccine as the blah blah, and we said blah blah because they would penalize you if you use the word vaccine. You couldn't have an open and honest discussion because the Google overlords were raining down on you. I'm hoping and I keep a healthy distrust of Elon Musk. I just don't trust any billionaire, including Donald Trump, that continually inserts themselves into the conversation and makes themselves a center of attention. I'm like, why are you doing that? But hopefully more Elon Musks will arise. I don't know. Maybe Mark Zuckerberg will keep rolling around on the floor with MMA Brazilian jiu-jitsu guys, and some testosterone will actually rub off on him and he'll grow a pair and come off of this censorship that we've seen him do for so long. And we can get back to the free market of ideas. So, 4 years from now, if I'm looking at my kids in the face and I say, I want to give you a better future, we got to get back to the transference of ideas, that ability that I can critically think in my mind, and then I can use the words that come out of my mouth and I can transfer them to your ears and ultimately into your brain. And then you can process those and send them back to me. And we can communicate once again, because social media isn't real life. At this stage in the game, I don't know if I'm communicating with a human or a bot. AI is a real thing. It's a very deceitful thing. It's like a laser. It can be used to heal. It can be used to harm, right? It's just a matter of whose hands it's in and how they're using it. But this is what's coming at us, whether we're ready for it or not. My mother's 81 years old. She's still trying to figure out how to get YouTube on her smart television. But yet we're getting bombarded with AI. And I see people all the time getting scammed by bots that are pretending to be me on social media. I get these messages every day. And it's like, come on, people, you got to be more aware. You got to be more aware. Social media is not real life. And I know when I walk into a restaurant, I don't start looking around the room and picking out. I just a real honest example. I did a live show in Tyler, Texas for New Year's Eve, and we were staying at the hotel, and some other friends of mine were there. We went to dinner. This girl comes up. She's got her head shaved. She's got an earring in her nose. She's all these things, just all those telltale signs. I'm like, I bet I know who you voted for if you voted at all. Like, I immediately made that judgment, but I was kind to her. She was kind to me. We didn't start, I didn't look at her and say, I bet I know who you voted for. It crosses your mind because in my brain, I find everything funny. And, in real life, we don't do that. Now on social media, we might have been at each other's throats. Because again, we're keyboard warriors and we do those things, but that's not where people live. So I don't walk in a restaurant and start trying to pick out who I think might align with me politically. I'm a member at a golf course here locally. I got to do something, right? So I go over to my golf course, and the guy that owns the golf course, he says, we don't have, he said, I'll censor this. He says, our members, we don't have Democrats and we don't have a-holes. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, buddy. I said, you might not have any Democrats out here, but you do have a couple of a-holes. I said, but it's a funny philosophy to have that. We don't have any Democrats out here at this golf club. Well, that's true and not true. Just because somebody, quote, aligns with you in some ways politically doesn't mean you're always going to get along with that person either. We saw that with the H-1B between the tech nerds and the MAGA people. Everybody was at each other's throat the other day. I didn't have H-1B visas on my bingo card on election night in terms of the most important issues we were going to be facing. But, we melt down. We see the people that supported Trump and the people that supported Ron DeSantis in the primary, and they're at each other's throat. I got people out there that absolutely hate me on X because I've said, here recently with numerous things they hate me for. Obviously, I'm easily hateable by some, I guess, but I made two posts this week where I said Donald Trump endorsed Mike Johnson. I don't particularly like Mike Johnson. I wish Mike Johnson had a stronger backbone than what he's obviously easily controllable. But I said, I'm going to support Donald Trump in endorsing him for Speaker of the House because I don't know everything Donald Trump knows. I don't know the deals that are being made. Now I'm going to hold it with an element of suspicion, but at this stage in the game, when 70%, 75% of Americans voted for Donald Trump, I'm going to trust the guy right now to say, okay, this is what we need in this moment because he's got to get this election certified. And if Mike Johnson, is he better than Kevin McCarthy was? Yeah, I think so. Is he strong MAGA? No. Um, do we have the votes in Congress right now to get somebody that's very strong MAGA? We don't before Monday, January 6th. And will Mike Johnson cave to the pressures of MAGA? Yeah, I think he will because we've seen him cave to a lot less. So let's use him. I said on Dinesh's show the other day, I said, I hate calling people a useful idiot, but let's use the useful idiot for right now. Well, you make those comments and you try to explain that logically to people and say, listen, this is politics. This is how you play the game. It's not ugly. And it's not a popularity contest all the time. This is how you play the game. Let's play this game for a little bit and get to where we need to be. And then we'll reassess after the inauguration. Um, Man, people hate you for talking like that, though. They really do. I mean, the vitriolic hate, like they're willing to crucify you over 250 characters on an X post. I mean, they are willing to crucify you for a 40-second video that you make about that stuff. And I just remind people, that's not the real world we're living in. That's not the real world we're living in. Don't make that, don't let that scare you from sharing your ideas, of giving your opinion. Because as we started this conversation, there are those big voids, so many things we don't know, and our brains rush to fill them with our questions and our imagination and our thoughts. Don't let the trolls under the bridge scare you off from that. That's not the world we live in. So I hope we can get back to the critical thinking and the free expression of ideas and the conveyance of those things without fear of repercussion for those. And these days when they're putting people in jail for a meme, this is a scary prospect of the future. And I'll tell you, I'll go one further. You talk about the dystopian futures that the movies are always talking about. There's, for years we've had those apocalyptic movies, The Day After Tomorrow, the Homestead movie from Angel Studios just came out about, LA getting hit with a nuclear bomb, and how are people prepared to survive after that. There's something fascinating in all of us with these end of the world scenarios. I don't think we're that far off anymore from Zombieland or Walking Dead or, the aliens being among us. Of course, I think they're driving past our solar system and locking the doors at this stage in the game because we're nowhere near joining the Federation of Planets or whatever Star Trek was, because we're so disgruntled and so disenfranchised and disjointed at this point. So, I hope our optimism wins out over the next few years, Seth. I really hope it does.
I hope it does as well. I'll keep fighting for it. I know as you will as well. And
Yeah.
so as we're wrapping up, I want to bring up your website. So it's just watchchad.com. And there you've got, they get you access to your book, your podcast, music about you. You've got your links to your social media, YouTube, et cetera, on there, your Twitter. So, recommend, folks check that out there. And, Chad, so here you go. Here's your tour dates. So this is a comedy
Yeah.
tour. Is that right?
Comedy tour. I know I talk about serious things, but I really am funny in real life. I'm kind of an anomaly. If I were just a comedian, it would be interesting. But I ran for governor in 2022. I was on the primary ballot. People they hate me. So I got people that hate me, love me for that. I've got the book that's been out for now. That one's been out a couple of years. Am I crazy? And the answer to that is yes. But we go out and I do stand up comedy. I'll be in Louisville, Kentucky this weekend. This next weekend. I'm sorry. And then we're bouncing all over the country. I say every year I'm not going to travel so far anymore because I was doing 200 dates a year in 35 states across the country, and now I'm 52 years old and I'm tired of airports and I'm tired of just going. But I'll be in Klamath Falls, Oregon on Valentine's Day, so I just can't slow down. I don't know. I think maybe that helps keep me that youthful vigor. If you will. But yeah, I tell people, let's go to watchchad.com. That is the most vain web address ever. Watch it. Sounds like an OnlyFans. I don't know what you're going to watch me do, but watch Chad or chadprather.com. People will find me. I'm out there, man. So Seth, the good thing is we get to make a living in a lot of ways running our mouth, right? It's a blessing. America affords us that opportunity to do it. We've taken advantage of it. We've both gone viral in different ways with our videos and our comments and commentary. And I'll tell you, we're blessed people, and I hope we can protect that. I really do. Of just that ability for us to just talk, and it's such a significant part of society.
It is, it is, and I'm happy to see the collapse of the mainstream media and this rise of independent media as well, because,
Yeah.
these conversations are important, and neither of us are, censoring ourselves, or, we're not avoiding certain topics, and this is what we need to have, again, like what you said, critical thinking, open dialogue.
Yeah.
Well, Chad, thank you again for joining us today. It's been great having you, and I look forward to next time. Thanks for doing what you're doing.
Thank you, brother.
Okay, every new year, we all spend a few days seriously thinking about what we can do to improve our lives. And usually it revolves around better health, right? I want to strongly encourage you to do what I do. Take responsibility for your health by taking Balance of Nature's whole food ingredient supplements. Seriously, they're packed with 31 varieties of fruit and vegetable ingredients, from tomatoes to sweet potatoes, and just about everything in between. This is a resolution you can truly keep all year long, like I do. So, folks, this is your last time to put it off, because today you can become a preferred customer at Balance of Nature. So, use my discount code SETH, SETH, to get 35% off, free shipping, plus a free fiber and spice supplement. This is an unbelievable new limited New Year's promotion, but you must use my discount code SETH. So call them at 800-246-8751 and use discount code SETH, or order online at balanceofnature.com. Use discount code SETH to get 35% off plus a free